Hey guys, welcome to what we're going to be doing for English class for the next 2 weeks basically. We're going to be studying about the civil rights movement in the United States. And you may be like, but why? Why are we studying that? Well, one, it's going to really tie into the fact that starting this semester, we're going to be moving into, instead of economics, you're going to be in contemporary history. In contemporary history, you're going to be using a world geography book because really that's going to be like our springboard of learning about history, is that we're going to be going around the world, okay, because we basically finished the world history book. So we don't, those are not the books that you're going to receive this time. This time you're going to receive the world geography books. But the reason why we're going to start here is actually has nothing to do with your book, but it's because last week was Martin Luther King Day, and then February is African American History Month, okay? So it's very important to learn. Unfortunately, throughout the entire world, especially in my experience in the United States, you know, I can't really speak for other nations as much, there's still a lot of racism in the world. The civil rights movement was meant to have the purpose of solving that issue of racism in the world in the realm of the legal aspect of the United States. So for example, we can't solve the problem of racism in an individual's heart, only they can do that. But the laws even of the land, the laws of the United States did not support the equal rights of African Americans. So there was the law that they had to go to different schools. There was the law that they had to be on different sidewalks. There was the law that they had to be in different restaurants. You know, the African American people were literally treated legally as if they were not as important as white people were, or what we would call Caucasian, instead of just calling them white people, okay? So the other reason why I'm excited about studying this is that you're gonna see a complete contrast, I hope, between the way that the civil rights movement was handled and what is going on today in the United States. And maybe you think sometimes like, well, who cares what's going on in the United States? It doesn't affect us, but it does. The United States is the most powerful nation in the Western Hemisphere. So that nation being powerful will affect every other nation in its vicinity, right? So it is important to know what's going on in the most powerful nations around the world. It's important to know what's going on in China. It's important to know what's going on in Russia. It's important to know what's going on in England. It's important to know what's going on in France. It's important to know what's going on in Germany. It's important to know what's going on in India. It's important to know what's going on in the Middle East. Okay, in the big areas of the world, it's important to know what's going on in general in Latin America. In the big regions around the world, which is more you're going to see that with the geography class this year, it's good to know what's going on so that you can see the big picture of things, right? So I don't know if you guys know, and I hope you guys do, but it's not something that we're going to study this week. I know that I had you read the article about Twitter taking Donald Trump off, etc., of Twitter, of Facebook, etc., etc., but I don't know if you know the full story of what caused that. Hopefully you do, if you're being aware of what's going on in the world. But, you know, we had our elections in November for the United States, and a lot of people in the United States are convinced that the elections were not fair, that the votes were not counted correctly or honestly, and that Joe Biden should not be our president, okay? It's a theory that people have. I can't tell you either way. Honestly, I think that both sides have faulty election processes, and, you know, Joe Biden is our president, so Joe Biden is our president. You know what I'm saying? So, but there's a lot of people that don't want to accept that. So through that, there has been like a lot of anger, and we have, just like you guys have partidos, right? Our partidos of government, the Republicans and the Democrats, are very have tension right now. And a couple weeks ago, the President Donald Trump, when he was president, was giving a speech, and he basically convinced the people there to keep fighting against the government to change the election results, because that was the day that in the Congress, which is the Senate, and the Republicans got together to read the votes from each state to do a formal process, a formal check-in that Joe Biden will become the next president. It's just a formality. It didn't change anything. No one was deciding anything that day. They were literally just reading off what happened in November. Okay, it's in the Constitution that they're supposed to do that in January before the inauguration of the next president. Well, the group of people that were with Donald Trump went to the Capitol where the Congress meets and basically invaded the Capitol of the United States, as if we're not a civilized country or something like that, and they think that a mob should go in and break windows, use guns, attack police, yell and scream and look for the senators and threaten them. And about 4 or 5 people died because of all the chaos that was caused by this protest, basically. Now, I'm not saying that President Donald Trump convinced them that day to do what they had done. You know, I'm not here to give my opinion about that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of evidence that it was already decided that would happen before the speech that President Donald Trump gave and everything like that. Whether he had influence or didn't have influence, not right now is the time to talk about that. But here's the problem. That was not a peaceful protest. So it did not gain respect. If you want to protest something, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is an amazing example on protesting something peacefully. And so today, what you're going to do is, you're going to watch 2 videos combined here about peaceful protests from African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement that are something that we need to learn from, something that is great to learn about. One will be added to this video, and the next one will be in part 2. So you're going to be watching, first of all, we're going to start to analyze tomorrow the I Have a Dream speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? But today you're going to hear a background video about that speech, about how that speech actually wasn't planned as much as we think it might have been planned from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And you're going to answer the true and false sheet of paper that you find in your packet. Just a couple questions that are true and false. What you're going to do is you're going to take notes on that video and take notes on the next video and do that true and false sheet. That's your homework for today, okay? The next video that you're going to see is about Little Rock 9. Ooh, there's one more thing about your homework today, sorry. I'll give you a resume at the end. Little Rock 9 is this really cool group of kids that were given the chance to go into a white high school to study, because that school had chosen integration, where the black people and the white people should come together to get an education. You're going to see the value that these kids put on education. And honestly, it's something that, I'm going to be quite frank with you guys, it's something that you guys need to learn, because these guys risked their lives for a good education, because they knew that was the only way that they would survive in society and that people would respect them, just like Booker T. Washington taught them about the African Americans. That if you want to be respected, you need to earn respect, and you need to start from the bottom and go up. And when these 9 kids got an opportunity to go to a white school where the education was a lot better, they risked their lives to do it. And I thought about you guys that, you know, I'm sorry, but the majority of you guys don't care about your education. Con puro amor mi corazón. You don't care about your education. You think it's a carga. And you need to look at it like these guys looked at it, that it is your lifeline. This is how you survive in the world. Is to get as much education as you can when God gives you the opportunity to do that. Okay? So what are you going to do with that video? You're going to tell me in a 10 sentence paragraph, who were the Little Rock Nine and what value did they put on education, and what is the evidence that was the value that they viewed education as? What value did they say education had, and what is the evidence that that's what they thought? Okay, so here you go, resumen. Take notes on both videos, do the true and false sheet of paper, and do the 10 sentence paragraph about who were the Little Rock Nine. Give me a good summary of it, as if I didn't know anything about them. And then how much value did they give to education, and how do you know that? What's the evidence? Okay, bye guys.
On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people gathered in the nation's capital for the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The march rallied Americans to stand up against the continuing political and social injustices African Americans still faced 100 years after emancipation. The march took place at a critical moment in the civil rights movement. Tension and racial unrest had been building up throughout the year, with anti-segregation demonstrators making headlines in Alabama and President John F. Kennedy announcing his intention to pass civil rights legislation. The timing was right for a massive demonstration. Due to security concerns, internal marshals were trained to ensure order within the crowd. But as it turned out, the marchers chose peace, not violence, that sunny Wednesday. The event featured speeches from prominent leaders and musical performances by Josephine Baker, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Mahalia Jackson, and many others. The march is probably best remembered for Martin Luther King Jr.'s acclaimed "I Have a Dream" speech. But we bet you didn't know the real story behind those famous words. King was the last speaker that afternoon, but not because he chose to be. King only spoke last that day because no one else wanted to. When organizers of the march debated who would speak when and for how long, none of the other speakers wanted the last slot because they figured most of the news crews would head out by mid-afternoon. King agreed to go last and to limit his remarks to only 4 minutes. And he didn't have to worry about not making the news. The audience gladly stuck around for his 16-minute speech. And you might be surprised to learn that King hadn't even intended to talk about his now famous dream that day. During a pause in his prepared speech, Mahalia Jackson called out from behind the podium, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." She was referring to a theme King had touched on in a speech 2 months earlier in Detroit. Honoring her request, King departed from his prepared remarks and delivered the legendary speech we all remember today. Historians believe that the marches and King's speech were important catalysts in passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Today, a memorial marks the spot where Martin Luther King described his dream of a better America in one of the most influential and memorable speeches in American history.